Good morning, everybody. We are going to wait just about 2 more minutes and then we will get started. Good morning, everybody. We are very happy to be here with you this morning. In case you don't know, and in case you've been attending so many workshops these days that you don't know how you ended up here, I'll remind you that you have tuned into the kickoff workshop for the 2023 Active Transportation Program. This is the 6th cycle of the ATP. My name is Lori Waters. I am the program manager for the Active Transportation Program at the California Transportation Commission. Also with me today running the workshop, we have Beverly Newman Burkhart and Alika Changizi, both with the Commission's ATP team, and Justin Hall with the Commission's admin team. You all probably have heard Justin's patient calming voice on many of the Commission's virtual meetings. Very much appreciate his help today. The Commission manages the Active Transportation Program with Caltrans ATP staff and headquarters local assistance. The Commission and Caltrans takes the lead on various aspects of the program. Very broadly, the Commission leads project selection while Caltrans manages implementation. But there's a lot of crossover along the way. Our colleagues at Caltrans are also available today if anything comes up that's more in their realm. Before we get started, Alika will review how you can participate in today's meeting. Alika?
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the 2023 Active Transportation Program Kickoff Workshop. Our workshops normally take place in different locations around the state. However, containment measures surrounding COVID-19 have required us to adjust to a webinar format. Please bear with us should we encounter any technical challenges. The workshop agenda is located under the Handouts tab and can be downloaded and saved during the webinar. It can also be found on the Commission's website. For participants joining us through the GoToWebinar, please find the webinar panel located on the right-hand side of your screen. There you will find the Audio, Questions, and Handouts tab. Under the Audio tab, you have the choice to listen in via computer or telephone option. If you prefer computer audio, please select the appropriate box. If you prefer the phone call option, select the corresponding box and dial the phone number, access code, and audio PIN as directed by the automated system. Please note that if the audio PIN is not entered, you will remain in listen-only mode and will be unable to speak should you have a comment. As a reminder, each registered attendee is provided a unique link and a phone number to access this webinar. These cannot be shared with other participants as they are registered to a specific attendee. We welcome comments and questions from attendees as a part of each topic at this workshop. There will also be an opportunity for comments and questions at the end of this presentation. There are two options for participants to provide comments today. You may either click on the hand icon to indicate you wish to make a comment. You will then be unmuted and called upon to make your comment. Please be sure to state your name and affiliation prior to voicing your remarks. Also, please use the raised hand feature as early into the topic as you can to give the system time to acknowledge you. You may also use the questions tab to submit a question or comment. Please type in the topic you are commenting on and your comment. Commission staff will read this on your behalf. You will not be able to be on camera while making your comments. And should you face any sort of technical issues throughout this webinar, please feel free to reach out to us through the chat and we will do our best to assist you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Alika. So I just want to add on to what Alika said that I'm going to be honest with everyone. I don't like virtual workshops. I like seeing everyone in person. It helps me to gauge how the workshop is going, the interest level in the topics, the energy in the room, and if someone is unhappy with something. With that said, virtual workshops do allow way more people to participate, and we really don't have any other option right now. But please, everyone, for our benefit as well as your own, ask questions and provide comments as we go along the workshop today and in future workshops. We really, really want to hear from you and hope to have the kind of hopefully have somewhat of the kind of dialogue that we usually get in regular ATP workshops. Okay, so before we begin officially, I want to continue a tradition that we've had in ATP workshops in our last few cycles. I like to start the workshops by telling some kind of an inspirational, interesting, fun, hopefully not boring, active transportation related story. I do this because I think it helps everyone try to get in a positive state of mind before we get down to business. So, Alika? Okay, so this summer I traveled to one of my favorite cities, and that's Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And while I was there, I went to this very interesting museum. It's the Bicycle Museum. It's called Bicycle Heaven. It is reportedly the world's biggest bike museum. There's over 4,000 bikes and it's totally free. So I love to go to museums. Before I got into the transportation field, I was a public history master's student, and one of the elements of that program is museum studies. So I like to go to museums wherever I'm at, and but I like when museums have some sort of a clear interpretive strategy, like they tell a chronological story or they have some sort of thematic approach, something like that. Museum doesn't have to be fancy, but you know, it needs to be set up to where a visitor can understand what's going on. But Bicycle Heaven, on the other hand, looked like this. Next slide. Okay. So there was just two stories of bike after bike after bike, all crammed together everywhere, with only some of them having a sign on them to tell you what you were looking at. Next slide. Here's another picture. I almost left right away because the place was just giving me so much anxiety because it was like total chaos in there. So here's one more picture that kind of shows you there was bikes on the ground, bikes on the wall, bikes hanging from the ceiling, just bike after bike. Okay. And all of these bikes were being watched over by this lady for some reason. But then once I got over my anxiety of this place, I decided to just try to figure out what was going on here and see what I could find out. So there was still no interpretive strategy, but if you took the time to just wander around and explore, there was many, many, many amazing treasures in this place. So some of them were historical, like this 1890s wood bike. This is another 1890s bike with, there was no chain and it had wooden wheels. This, oops, speaking points out of order. These are the, sorry, find my speaking notes here. Okay, these are the Bowden Spacelander bicycles, which Benjamin Bowden first invented in the 1940s in Michigan after World War II. These ones I think were actually produced in the 1960s, but only about 500 of these bikes were made. They were the first bikes made out of fiberglass. They didn't sell very well at the time because they were too expensive, but now they are very rare collector's items. Next. Okay, and then they had a lot of mixed throughout. There was a lot of bikes that reflected culture or history. So some of these, you may know who these people are or not, but this is Kangaroo, and Captain Kangaroo, he's promoting Schwinn bikes. This is the Evel Knievel bike from sometime in the 1970s. This is the Fonzie bike from the Happy Days TV show. This is the Pee Wee Herman bike. Let's see. And this bike is an actual real prop from the Pee Wee's Big Adventure movie. These are the Hopalong Cassidy bikes. And then this is the Monkeys bike from the Monkeys TV show. Apparently they actually rode this bike. Here's another picture of it with the Monkeys spelled wrong. And this one, it says it's the world's fastest bike at 136 miles per hour. I don't totally understand that. I tried to figure out what was going on with this one, but I couldn't find anything. And then these are boys and girls sneaker bikes. And then there was other things, like this is a May is Bike Month poster from 1961. This is the Beatles Yellow Submarine bike. This is the Radio Flyer bike that actually has an actual radio in it. This one was the Super Trike. Oh, this was a unicycle, I think. Get my notes on this one. Okay, this is the 1980s Super Trick cycle. The sign says a unicycle with a front wheel, and clowns loved it. This one is the Schwinn Runabout. They were sold as fold-up commuter bikes in 1968, 1969, and 1970. And then they also had donated bikes with handwritten signs on them, and if you took the time to read them, some of them are really touching and interesting. This one was from a mom who donated her daughter's bike because she was one of the few girls competing in BMX races in the 1980s. And of course, there was a neon room. And then this is the bike tree. The sign says, "This freak of nature was found in rural Ohio on a farm. This is the only place to see 2 bicycles and a tree, a 1930s Dayton and a 1960s Schwinn. Okay. And then this one was a early women's bike. It had a, those guards are for their skirt guards. And then I can't remember on this one. I got my notes out of order, but anyway, go ahead. You keep going. This is another Hopalong Cassidy with the pistols. Okay, and then there was just some very random things like this says some dummy left this. Look inside, but be careful. You look inside, and of course there is a dummy in it. Okay. Oh, and then finally, this was the most intriguing item in bicycle heaven. This is the butt-powered bike. The pedals are stationary. You ride it by bouncing up and down on the seat. For some reason, this bike style never caught on. Okay, so I hope everybody enjoyed that. That is, again, that's Bicycle Heaven in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I would recommend, I recommend anyone going to Pittsburgh. It's a great city, and I really recommend if you just like to go to weird museums, see interesting things, it's a fun place to go. Okay. All right, so down to business here. This is the basics for the program this cycle. The years that we'll be programming for the 2023 ATP is fiscal years 23, 24, 24, 25, 25, 26, and 26, 27. We anticipate similar funding available as last cycle, about 445 million. That'll be split up about 100 million in fiscal years 23, 24, and 24, 25, and about 123 million in 25, 26, and 26, 27. As some of you might have heard, there was some funding in the new federal transportation bill for what was called the TAP funds is now called the Surface something or other funds. There's about $1 billion more in there, but it has to be split up among the states. So we're figuring out right now if that means that there will be a little bit more funding in the ATP this cycle. Okay, and these are the engagement principles that the commission staff that we started last cycle. And we think that they still apply even in the virtual environment. So what we commit to as commission staff as we go through the process is we will consider all your comments. We will post workshop materials prior to the workshop. This is one that, and those of you know me, that I have the hardest time with, but hopefully Alika and Beverly will help me with this. We will keep moving the process forward. We'll keep a statewide perspective on the program, and we will always listen to what any of you, the stakeholders, have to say. And this is what we ask of you, the working group. We call all of you that engage in the active transportation program as our working group. We ask you to be respectful, please, of all of the other viewpoints, consider the greater good of the program, propose ideas in a public setting. If you can, that means that everybody can hear them and we can have a conversation about if you have some sort of proposal, and trust commission staff. What I mean by that is that we trust us that we will do what I said in the previous slide. We will always consider your ideas and your comments. Okay, so for today, this is what we'd like to get done today. We want to review our workshop strategy for this cycle. We'll go over the program schedule. If we could, we would really like to finalize that today. So everybody has a clear idea of when things are due and what's going to be happening. We want to introduce potential program changes that have come up from the ATP program has a technical advisory committee, and so we worked with the TAC to see what, if any, program changes we should be proposing this cycle. We want to hear from the working group, from all of you, and if you've been thinking that there's things that you would like to see in the program. And we are going to have a presentation from Josh Rosa on the Pro Housing Designation Program. If you were on the local partnership program workshop yesterday, you would have heard about this, but you get to hear Josh again. And then we will review action items. Okay, so this is our workshop strategy. We also started this last cycle, and we think it worked very well. We'll have workshops that are either central workshops or branch workshops. This is what's considered a central workshop, where it's just about this one is specifically about the guidelines, and everybody, the whole working group is here, and we move the process forward. Branch workshops are more centered on a particular region, and this is where we do more education on the program in general. We go over how that particular area has fared in the program historically, what we're seeing that they could do better, and we take questions specifically from people in that area. And but we don't make major decisions on the program in those workshops. We do that in the central workshops. All workshops will be held virtually until further notice, and they'll be in GoToWebinar or GoToMeeting platforms. Okay, now to talk about the workshop schedule, I will be turning it over to Alika.
Great, thank you, Lori. So as Lori mentioned, the workshops for the 2023 ATP will be broken out into central and branch workshops. Just as a quick reminder, again, the central workshops are structured similar to ones held in prior cycles, where recommendations and final decisions on the guidelines, the applications, and the scoring rubrics will be made, and these are exclusively done at the central workshops. The branch workshops are more informal and will focus more on educating the agencies about the program basics while addressing any questions in regards to the upcoming cycle. And so this slide here outlines the central workshops that we have scheduled for the 2023 ATP. Following this kickoff workshop today, we have our first central workshop to discuss the program guidelines, and you'll see that that is scheduled for November 17th. Next, we have the project study report equivalent workshop scheduled for December 1st, where capital assistance staff will go over the PSR overview, highlighting the requirements and definitions, the engineer's checklist, and an overview of the non-infrastructure and plan application requirements. The main focus of this workshop will be on the engineer's checklist, specifically the maps, cross-sections, the engineer's estimate, and schedule preparation. Crash and safety data, warrant studies, and guidance, and any sort of additional narration documentation will also be discussed in that workshop. There are two additional guideline development workshops scheduled for December 15th and January 11th. The January 19th workshop will focus on revisions and updates to the applications. And February 8th will focus on updates to the scoring rubrics. Lastly, we've included an optional workshop scheduled for February 23rd. In the event we need to further discuss anything else pertaining to the guidelines, applications, or scoring rubrics, if it's determined that this workshop is no longer needed, then we will be So just as a final note for the central workshops, these are not mandatory workshops. However, we always encourage our stakeholders to participate just to ensure a full understanding of the revisions and updates to the guidelines, applications, and scoring rubrics. The branch workshops, you'll see are listed here. These are the regions that have requested branch workshops thus far. So we have requests from the AMBAG region, Santa Barbara County, Siskiyou County, and Nevada County. I'll be working with these regions to schedule their branch workshops before the call of projects goes out. The workshops, again, are not mandatory, and as Lori and I mentioned earlier, these will be more tailored to the specific agencies and their regions. If anyone is interested in scheduling a branch workshop, please feel free to contact me directly at alika.changizi@catc.ca.gov. In addition to the central branch workshops, we're also offering virtual site visits to any interested agencies. These site visits are a great opportunity to discuss Cycle 6 projects with Commission staff and ask any questions that you may have. We'll be available every Tuesday and Friday beginning this November through February of next year. To make scheduling easier, we've created an online registration form that shows Commission staff's current availabilities. The link to this form is located in this presentation that will be posted on our website, and it's also located on our website as well, the direct link to it. If you're interested in scheduling a site visit, I recommend doing it sooner rather than later, since we already have about 30 site visits scheduled so far. At this time, all of these site visits will be held virtually until further notice. And with that, I will hand it over to Beverly.
Thanks, Alika. Good morning, everyone. Next slide, please. Thank you. So I'm going to go over our proposed program schedule. And as Laura mentioned, we are hoping to finalize this schedule today, so you'll have the opportunity to give feedback at the end of this presentation. So next slide, please, Alika. Thank you. Okay, so we plan on presenting the draft guidelines to the Commission at the January 26th and 27th, 2022 Commission meeting, which will take place after our final plan workshop on the guidelines. And during that Commission meeting, the draft fund estimate will also be presented. At the March 16th and 17th Commission meeting, the Commission will hold a hearing on the guidelines and will vote whether to adopt them. They will also vote whether to adopt the fund estimate. The call for projects will be issued shortly after the guidelines are adopted. And we're hoping to post the scoring rubrics as soon as possible after the call for projects, because they're a really useful resource for the applicants. So we're hoping, if we don't need as many guidelines workshops as we planned, we're hoping to move up the discussions on scoring rubrics and applications to earlier dates. However, we do not plan on posting scoring rubrics before the guidelines are adopted, just because it's possible that the guidelines could change at the Commission meeting when they're adopted. So the optional MPO guidelines will be considered at the June Commission meeting, and draft guidelines will be due in May. Our proposed due date for those draft guidelines is May 13th. And then our proposed application due date for all application types, including quick builds, is June 15th, 2022. Next slide, please. So evaluations will take place between June and October, and staff recommendations for the statewide small urban and rural and quick build pilot program will be posted in late October. And then the Commission will consider staff recommendations at its December 2022 meeting. And after that, the MPOs will begin work on their components. So we are proposing February 20th, 2023 as the due date for the draft MPO recommendations. And then final recommendations would be due on April 21st, 2023. And then we would post them in May 2023, and then the Commission would vote whether to adopt them at the June 2023 meeting. So that is our proposed schedule, and now we can open it up for any questions or comments from participants.
Actually, I was going to say something. Okay, so I'm going to try not to keep hopping on this too much, but I just wanted to, I had two thoughts when Alika and Beverly were talking. One is Alika mentioned the PSR equivalent workshop that Caltrans puts on. I want to encourage everyone to attend that workshop if possible. We started that last cycle and Caltrans did an excellent job on that workshop, and we saw a definite increase in the quality of the plans and the design in last cycle in the applications. We will post that afterwards for people to watch, but I really want to encourage everyone to attend that. Also, when Beverly was talking, and she was saying that we present the draft fund estimate with the guidelines, and then we adopt the fund estimate with the guidelines. Just in case people don't know, the fund estimate is prepared by Caltrans budgets, and that is where it says how much funding we actually have for that programming cycle. And we have a general idea, like I said in the beginning, of how much funding we have. However, Caltrans goes through and just kind of makes it all official. And then sometimes we are also able to capture savings from past cycles to add into the fund estimate. So the fund estimate is basically, that's what it is. It tells us what's an estimation of the funding that we will have to program for that cycle. And remember, the program is broken down into the statewide, small urban and rural, and the MPO. So 50% of the funds will go to the statewide component, competitive component, 10% to the small urban and rural competitive component, and 40% to the metropolitan planning organization component. Okay, and now I will see if, and please ask questions and give comments at any time, and we will check in with Justin right now.
Thank you, Lori. We do have public comment at this time. We have attendees with their hands raised, as well as written submissions. I will start by reading off some of the written questions we've received. First comes in from Kayla McDonald Encina. She writes, when will TA be available through the ATRC? It might be good to show this in the timeline.
Okay, that I'm not positive. Emily Abrahams with Caltrans should be, or Summer is on the workshop. I'm going to give them a minute, and they can come on and answer that. But maybe we can take another question while that's happening.
Next question comes from Joseph Stramaglia. He writes, will this draft schedule be available in document form, maybe part of the slides?
Yeah, we'll post all the slides, and we can actually post the schedule too, but this is not, this is our proposed schedule. It's based, last cycle, our schedule got a little bit weird because of COVID. We pushed things back. This is more of our standard schedule, but we work on the schedule with the working group. And one area that we always talk about a little bit with the MPOs is if they're okay with the schedule, and like you, Joe, and anyway, so this is just a draft schedule, but so if anybody has any comments and would like suggestions on the schedule, let us know.
Next question comes from Rachel Paras. Rachel asks, will the submissions be electronic this round?
Yes, they will be electronic. I was actually thinking about this when Beverly was talking. So we're going to talk about how many hard copies we need, because to be honest, commission staff, last time, we didn't really use the hard copies. We've gotten so used to just reading them on electronically that I don't know, I haven't talked to Beverly and Alika yet, but I don't know if we're gonna need hard copies. And we are not sending hard copies to evaluators anymore. What I don't know is if Caltrans will need them to review, because they do the delivery of the project. They do that review. So it may all be electronic, or we may need 1 or 2 hard copies. We'll get back to you on that. And then I think Emily is on to answer the question about the ATRC. So I'm gonna let her come on.
Emily, you are free to unmute yourself.
Hello, I'm actually going to pass it over to Summer Lopez.
Summer, you are now unmuted and free to comment.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much. So yes, to answer the technical assistance question, our technical assistance survey / application for TA will go out in about the next week or 2, which I'd like to take a moment and just say that if any of you are in need of technical assistance, please make sure that you're signed up for the ATRC listserv, and you'll be able to apply for our technical assistance program. And we should have our technical assistance consultant on board by mid-January, and we'll be launching the technical assistance program around that time. But yes, please watch out for the technical assistance application, which will be launched again in about a week or 2.
Thank you so much, Summer. So I'm really glad that question came up, because I think that would be a good thing that we could talk about for a couple minutes at our next workshop. Maybe we can have Summer or Emily present just for a few minutes on that in our next workshop. So thank you for that. And I will turn off my mic and go back to Justin.
Next question comes from Jeff Knowles. He asks, what is the most appropriate method to submit suggestions to CTC staff?
Well, if it's on something that we're talking about today, you can either submit the comment through to Justin, or he can unmute you and you can ask a question. If not, you can send an email to any of us, me, Beverly, or Alika, and we can get back to you, or if it's something that's appropriate for a workshop, we can bring it up in the workshop. And I think we'll have our contact information at the end, right, Alika? Okay. Yes. I hope that answered that.
Next comment comes from Philip Sales. He writes, the approval of the MPO guidelines 2 months after the call for projects seems very tight if projects are due a month later.
You want to?
Sorry, Justin, can you repeat that, please?
Certainly. The approval of the MPO guidelines 2 months after the call for projects seems very tight if projects are due a month later.
So this is our normal schedule for, I think this is what we did last cycle as well for the MPO guidelines. And I believe that if MPOs weren't ready, they were able to come at the August meeting instead. I don't know, Lori, if you want to elaborate on that.
So we're talking about the MPO guidelines, not the MPO.
Yeah, so
Okay.
they're saying the call for project goes out, and then just at basically a couple months later, the commission is approving the optional guidelines for the MPOs.
Okay, well, I guess I would say to that is that, first of all, not all the MPOs have optional guidelines. They only submit guidelines if they're doing something different from the statewide program. And I would hope that the MPOs are working with their stakeholders in the process, so it wouldn't be a surprise on what is in the MPO guidelines. But we can look at that.
Next question comes from Rubina. She asks, how do we sign up for the listserv that was just mentioned?
Go back to 7.
I think,
Is that probably the ATRC listserv?
yeah, I mean, when we can post, when we post these slides afterwards, we can include a link to how to sign up for their listserv. I don't know if you want to unmute Summer, but we can include that like in follow-up materials for this meeting.
Yeah, and like I said, we can do in our next workshop, we can do a quick maybe introductions on the ATRC and the list and their listserv and their technical assistance.
Next comment comes from Katie Martell. She asks, for virtual site visits, do we prepare a presentation with photos, description, maps, a project, or do you want a walkthrough during the site visit?
I'm going to let Alika take that. We've done one so far, and it was really good, and it worked out well. For this particular project, we just looked at photos, and that worked out fine for this project, but we could do a virtual walkthrough too. But Alika, what do you think?
So these site visits are more tailored towards the agencies or the region. So as long as you're able to provide a good understanding to us so that we can understand your project, that will be the most helpful. So any sort of maps, renditions, plans, anything of that sort to have available will be really useful and helpful for us. And it'll allow our feedback to be more helpful for you in return. We do have some agencies that I've spoken to that plan to create a PowerPoint slide. That's totally acceptable. You can have short clips and videos of the project location in the event you want us to really see and feel the project area. So whatever works best for you. And I hope that answers the question. If not, feel free to reach out to me and I'm happy to assist more.
Next question comes from Sheila. She asks, for the statewide program, what is the difference between the call for projects and the date to submit the final application?
Beverly, you want to answer?
yeah, so the call for projects is when kind of the application period opens. So like obviously the guidelines will be available and we'll get the scoring rubrics up as soon as possible, and everyone will be able to start filling out their applications, and you'll be able to submit your application anytime during that period. And then the due date is just the final date in which you can submit your application. Hopefully that answers the question.
I have one attendee with their hand raised at this time. We have Carl Anderson. Carl, you're now muted and free to comment.
Hey, it's Carl Anderson from the Metropolitan Transportation Commission. The MPO schedule on the back half, I would say, looks consistent with previous cycles, so no comment there. FTC would be supportive of that. But it does look like the statewide schedule is kind of advanced by 1 month, and I'm having trouble finding why you guys did that. And so I was curious, what was the justification for that? And then another question, with the potential augmentation of funds coming from the general fund, is there any advantage or disadvantage to going back to, I would say, the previous cycle 4 schedule to kind of see how that plays out, to see if we can get more funding as part of the fund estimate, or what the process would be for that?
Where are you saying that we advanced?
I think
Which
it's
part?
saying that we're adopting the statewide a month sooner than we usually would. We're doing it in December instead of January. Is that? I think that's.
Yeah, that's what I've noticed. Yeah, and it seems like the evaluation period's about the same. So I was just curious why we're shifting it up a little bit. Just curious. No issue with it, but just curious.
I don't know. I don't remember.
Yeah, I'm not. We can go back and look at it.
Yeah, so are you thinking that you would prefer the January adoption of the statewide small urban and rural? It might be because, so the earlier, I would think the earlier we adopt the statewide small urban and rural, that gives you, the MPOs, the large MPOs, more time. And I'm not sure if that answers you, Carl. And then what Carl is talking about on the possible augmentation is that the commission back in last budget cycle, and then again in this budget cycle, we have requested $2 billion as an augmentation to the active transportation program out of the surplus of the general fund. We were actually, I don't know, approved is the right word, for 500 million in the last budget. However, there needed to be a trailer bill that was approved that would give us the opportunity to use that 500 million. That did not end up happening. So so a new budget cycle has started. So we went back to our original 2 billion request. And so we'll see what happens. And I don't know how that will fit in with the cycle. We'll just have to see how that plays out, because if we are successful, we may not find out till next May. And Carl, come back on if that didn't quite hit the mark on your question.
No, I mean, that's fine. That's sufficient. Yeah, I feel like every MPO appreciates more time for their processes. So yeah, I'm supportive of this schedule.
Okay, thanks, Carl.
Up next, we have Victoria Cacciatore.
Hello, Victoria Cacciatore with SACOG, and I was calling to express support for the December adoption. That does allow more time for any potential sequential calls for projects at the MPO round, and that is it.
Thank you, Victoria. I think we have done it in December in the past, because I just think about where we're at meetings, and I seem to remember adopting a program when we were in Riverside in December at some point. So I think we've probably done it both in December and January, depending on circumstances. So so we'll sounds like December is getting some support for now.
I do not see any other attendees indicating they wish to make public comment at this time.
Okay, Beverly, I'll turn back to you and see if you have anything else you wanted to add here.
Nope, I think that's the overview of our schedule, and we'll go back and look at the comments that everyone gave us, and then we can report back at the next workshop if there are any changes to the schedule. So I believe I am handing things back over to Lori.
Okay, thank you, Beverly. And on the schedule, sometimes we do get more comments on the MPO part of the schedule. So if any of you, the large MPOs out there, are responsible for the ATP, if you want to talk to us later, if you have some concerns, because I know that you have to factor in your board meetings and things. So just let us know. Okay. So now we are going to talk about areas that we have identified for revision. And when I say we, I also mean our technical advisory committee. Okay, so next slide, Alika. Thank you. Okay, so this is really important for this cycle in particular. We have been working with the stakeholders over the last cycles to refine, streamline, and stabilize the program. And what I mean by that is in the first couple cycles, there was major changes every programming cycle. Changes to the guidelines, changes to the application, changes to the scoring. And that was okay because it was a new program, and we were trying to get things to where most everybody was as satisfied as they could be. However, now that we are starting our 6th cycle, we're really trying to stabilize the program. And that is partly for us, but it's mostly for all the applicants, because the program is very competitive. So every cycle we have a lot of applicants that were not successful that would like to reapply. So when we keep changing the program significantly every cycle, it's difficult for the applicants, because then they have to redo things and rethink everything in their application and their project. So this cycle, we are hoping to try to keep the program pretty stable and not introduce major changes. And there was some things that we talked about with the Technical Advisory Committee, and the Technical Advisory Committee, who in a smaller form represents all of you too. They agreed that it would be good to try to keep the program very stable and not introduce a lot of changes. Okay, I think I said everything that was on there. So next slide. So these are what we considered the more, I guess, major changes that we came up with, or that we see going on right now. One is that we need to continue to align the program with state housing goals in collaboration for the Department of Housing and Community Development. So we introduced this very lightly last cycle, where we asked some prompts in our application about housing. But we had committed to going a little bit further this cycle, and we are going to have a presentation from HCD, and then we can talk more about what we are thinking about for how to do that this cycle. Also, last cycle we had a quick build project pilot program. So I would say that our pilot program was partially successful. And what I mean is that it was successful in that we got a decent amount of applications, which showed us there is interest in quick builds. And we would like to continue funding quick builds. However, on the other hand, I would say our guidance was not as good as it should be. So we maybe didn't get, some of our applications were not quite what we were thinking of as a quick build. So we think that there are still things that we need to iron out on the quick build process. So we want to continue this as a pilot program for this cycle. So we want to continue funding some quick builds, but we think we still need more time in a pilot program. Okay, and the next one is awarding points for the inclusion of a project in an approved active transportation plan or similar kind of plan. So I'm bringing this up, but any of you who have been involved in the program for a while, this has been in the guidelines probably since the beginning, saying that we would be doing this, and now we are going to do it. We are going to have points if a project is in a plan, because we want to see that that the agency is putting a priority on this project. But we want to work with you, the working group, on how exactly we do that. If we expect it out of all of the types of projects, how many points, all of those kinds of things. We will work with you, the working group, on this. And this last one, this came from stakeholders. This is not from the commission staff, so I just want to be clear, this is from stakeholders, but I did promise the stakeholders that I would bring this up, and it's something that we will talk about, probably not this workshop, but we will talk about it in a workshop. This is having a funding set aside for non-infrastructure projects. The reason that this has come up is that some stakeholders think that as the projects have gotten larger every cycle, that some other types of projects, particularly non-infrastructures, are not able to compete as well as the large projects that can show more benefits and can seem like they do more. But this is not something that we have agreed to yet, but we have agreed to talk about it. Okay, so those were the more what we considered more major. Every cycle, though, we have other less major things that we need to work on in the guidelines. And these are, we want to specify the types of documentation that applicants submit to substantiate their leveraging. And we had in there that applicants needed to submit documentation, but we weren't clear on it, so we got kind of a lot of different things. This is that we have been working with the Department of Aging, that we want to make sure that applicants are considering the aging population in their applications. I'm a little bit embarrassed that we haven't done this before. It's kind of an oversight. So we ask about a lot of different populations, but we want to make sure that the applicants are considering all users and particularly the aging population, because sometimes they are the most vulnerable, particularly in the safety area. Okay, and we are going to incorporate more prompts for applicants to discuss low stress features and networks, and that would be in the large applications. We want to make sure that the applicants are thinking about that they, particularly if they're putting in a larger facility, that it is as low stress as possible for their users. And we are going to prompt applicants to discuss local ordinances that encourage active transportation, in that this would likely be in the transformative projects question that's just in the large application. Okay, next one. And then we also will have these are more administrative changes, but they are important that everybody know about. And we probably we may not cover them in depth in a workshop, but they're important, and we may need to work with some stakeholders on the appropriate language, particularly on the first one. So as the projects that we are funding have gotten larger and larger every cycle, we are seeing a need to segment some of the largest projects. That is for project delivery. And we've done it a couple times, but we don't have anything in the guidelines. So I feel like we are figuring it out every time we do it new. And I think we need it in the guidelines so everybody understands how to do it and when we do it and why and all of those things. Scope change requirements, we just need to clarify those a little bit. Particularly one aspect of that is that we want to make sure if an applicant, an implementer needs to submit a scope change, that they do that before they get their construction allocation. And this is a little bit technical. We need to put some guidelines in there for downscope projects funded in the MPO component in instances of an augmentation. This came up the last cycle when we thought we were going to get augmented some funds. Sometimes when an applicant applies to the statewide component and then they also apply to the MPO component with the downscoped project, because the MPOs don't have the funding amount to fund the larger project. So we just want to clarify, just have some guidelines around that. And we want to clarify procedures for canceled projects. All the time, not a lot, but we do have some projects that the implementer needs to let go of for a lot of times very good reasons. And so we just want to have some procedures around that. So those are more administrative changes, but you'll see them, and it's important to pay attention to them. And we will cover those at least minimally in a workshop. Okay, so I'm going to stop now and go to Justin for questions. So what we can do here is we can get questions and comments now, both on what I've presented, but then this is also at the point that we wanted to hear from you on if there's anything you've been thinking about that you think needs to be improved in the program, specifically the guidelines right now. Or if there's revisions that you would like to, you think that should be brought forward for discussion at a workshop. So I will turn off my mic and we'll go to Justin.
Thank you, Lori. We have received public comment at this time. We have received written comments, and we also have attendees with their hands raised. I will start with the attendees who have their hands raised at this time. Up first, we have Jonathan Matz. Jonathan, you're free to unmute yourself and make a comment.
Hi, apologies in advance. I'm having some connectivity issues, so please let me know if you're having trouble hearing me. I did have a couple additional questions, and then had some points on all the things that you mentioned. I don't want to monopolize things, so if we want to kind of like have dedicated sections for each of the potential changes that you mentioned. A couple of additions to the list. One is I know in the past, particularly on questions of disadvantaged communities, a lot of stakeholders have mentioned that the current metrics that we have don't necessarily take into account high housing costs in their areas, and so things like area median income don't necessarily capture the full story. I did want to raise awareness about a tool called the Housing and Transportation Affordability Index, which it's a national data tool actually, but could potentially be used as a statewide metric to capture those concerns. And then also on the leveraging question before, I wanted to raise the possibility that for that complete streets projects that are programmed in Caltrans's SHOP program, or in the SHOP, I was wondering if those might be potentially looked at as a potential qualifier for leveraging points, particularly in rural communities that have many fewer revenue streams than some of the larger, more urban communities, and are less likely to be self-help counties, that kind of thing. And maybe applying for ATP projects that are actually continuous with Caltrans right away and want to coordinate their programs with some of the complete streets improvements that are being planned in the SHOP. Being able to point to that coordination and to those contiguous improvements that the local Caltrans district is doing would help, I think, those agencies that often aren't able to compete for those leveraging points. So those are a couple of additions. And then I'm not sure if there's a plan to like go sort of point by point on the things you mentioned about quick build and reservations for non-infrastructure, things like that, because I have thoughts on all of those, but don't want to monopolize the whole meeting.
So Jonathan, I'll for the two things that you mentioned first, if people want to comment on those now, they can, but we will also put them as action items. We will talk about those at a future workshop. So we'll add those as topics for discussion at a future workshop. And then on the non-infrastructure, I would like to, if you want to comment on that now, go ahead. But I would say we're still trying to come up with, if we were going to propose something, what it would be. So that's why I was kind of hoping to save that for a future workshop, but I don't want to tell you can't comment now. So just go ahead and continue, and we will, any other suggestions you have, we'll keep them with our action items.
Okay, so just on the set aside, some quick thoughts. I wasn't aware this was being considered. I mean, we have kind of found consistently that combined infrastructure and non-infrastructure applications actually tend to be the best performing out of all applications and are kind of consistent with what we recommend at the Safe Routes Partnership for best practices of implementing non-infrastructure. While standalone non-infrastructure projects they're not many in number in terms of applications and even fewer in terms of the ones awarded, the combined ones are actually kind of outcompeting everything else. So to some extent, I wonder if maybe that's a trend that we should want to prioritize. But if there is a set aside, I mean, my first instinct is actually to have a set aside for plans, which after doing very well in cycle 4, did not do well in cycle 5, and are really kind of a stepping stone for future success in the program, particularly for some of the smaller agencies. If we're moving towards a process by which having your project including in the plan is so advantageous in the application, then really making sure that as many communities as possible are able to even have those plans in the first place seems like it should be a priority to me. So I know we have a kind of a maximum of 2% of the program dedicated to going to plans, but at this point we're not even getting close to fulfilling that. So I would actually contend that that's maybe a more pressing need for set-asides on that. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Did you have anything else, Jonathan?
Yeah, just on the quick builds, and sorry, I'll yield at this point. Likewise, and sort of consistent with what I mentioned before about trying to really amplify the plans applications. I think that the quick build pilot project should be folded into the plans application, and applicants who are successful in getting their plans funded can then have the opportunity to get some additional money to build things out. Trial runs of some of the projects that emerge from their planning process to tweak the details, and then use that for further success in ATP cycles. I mean, I think what we want to be encouraging is long-term success with permanent projects through the ATP. And so by having it in the plans application, you kind of accomplish a few things. You're able to really bolster that planning process and have the quick builds be that kind of trial and error step to a more permanent thing. It maintains the transparency of the scoring process instead of having it kind of taken out of the general evaluation pool as it is currently. And as I mentioned before, if we're moving towards some tweaks that award points for projects that come out of plans, it's one more means of actually enabling particularly the smaller communities, smaller agencies to have those plans and those proposed projects on the books and ready to go in subsequent ATP cycles.
Okay, thank you, Jonathan. So we got all that down, and we will put those suggestions in our action items, and we will talk about them in future workshops as we get into more deeper on each of those topics.
Up next, we have Claire Galligley. Claire, you're free to unmute yourself.
Okay, I'm unmuted now. Hi, Lori, thanks. That was all really good information. First, I'd like to take off of what Jonathan was just saying. I think that the existing Caltrans planning grants are a great vehicle to be able to build capacity in planning and is much more tailored to that actual action. So I'd encourage people to continue utilizing the Caltrans planning grant for planning. I know that we do have a small amount of funds that are intended for plans, but really that's a fund source that's set up perfectly for that. Second, on two things. One, talking about aging populations, I think using language like 8 to 80 or inclusive ages would be good. I think some of the applications you'll see will probably be more tailored to SRTS type projects that might not be as applicable, while some might be tailored towards projects or programs around senior facilities, senior centers, et cetera. And so I think making sure that language is broad rather than narrow, so it's not like an SRTS project that's losing points for not incorporating senior members as intentionally would be a way to capture that. And then second, with the language about low stress routes, I think what we've seen is that might be really appropriate for transformative projects, but maybe not so much for projects that are just getting in simple sidewalks where they don't exist right now or doing just like the starting steps. So I think looking at maybe adding that low stress language to the very large or transformative type of projects would be appropriate. But in some of the smaller projects, I think really what we would like to see is communities that are taking that first step where a super, a awesome multi-use path might be great, but a sidewalk is all that you can get in, and that would be a great advance in active transportation. So those are my comments at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. Those were very good suggestions, and we will bring those in when we talk about those subjects more in depth, but thank you very much.
Next, we have Carl Anderson.
Hi there, Carl Anderson with MTC. I would say I'm supportive of maintaining the Quick Build pilot program. I think that's great, and I'm excited to continue to learn more and how we can best deliver those projects through the CTC and through Caltrans. Also supportive of still maintaining the plan set aside. That's something that's been in the guidelines since the inception of the program, so nothing to change there. I would exercise some sort of caution about doing a set aside for non-infrastructure projects. I think one thing I would want to see first is how much money have we spent on non-infrastructure only projects already, and has that declined over cycles, or is that just an assumption people are making? And since that is a specific application type, if we set that precedent in creating a set aside for that application type now, I don't see anything that would stop us from creating set asides for all the other application types in future cycles. So I just want to be cautious of that. That's it.
Thank you, Carl. And what you said about the data, we're looking at the data on the non-infrastructure now. That was one reason that we kind of want to hold off on getting too much into it now, because we want to see what the data is showing us or not showing us now too. So thank you. I'll go back to Justin.
Up next, we have Nafili Barrett. Nafili?
Hi, thank you. Nafili Barrett with the Mendocino Council of Governments. So, first, I just wanted to confirm the issue of a further focus on housing in the scoring will be a topic of discussion at a later workshop. And then I also wanted to suggest for a later discussion, and this kind of ties in with some of the other comments that have been made, particularly the commenter that talked about jurisdictions that just want to fit in sidewalks where none exist. But the challenge of funding kind of the basic walking and biking projects as opposed to the massive transformative projects.
Thank you, Nafili. So the housing, that is the one main topic that we were hoping to talk about today. So after we get some comments now, we are going to have a presentation on the pro-housing designation, and then we can talk more about that. And then I kind of missed the second part of what.
You want me to repeat?
Yes, please.
Okay. So I just think that it might be helpful at a future workshop to talk about the challenge of funding some of those kind of more simple projects that are just getting in sidewalks or bike lanes where none exist in an existing community, as opposed, as there's more and more of a focus on the massive transformative projects, those projects become more challenging. So just a discussion on that.
Okay, thank you, Nafili. Yes, we can do that.
Thank you.
Up next, we have Woodrow Deloria.
Good morning, Lori. So I just want to support what Nafili just said regarding transformative projects. You know, a lot of the rural counties continue to have a need for, you know, sidewalks, class 1 facilities. And while those may not seem transformative to our large urban neighbors, you know, a sidewalk in a neighborhood in a rural community really can provide that transformative change. Also, just want to applaud your direction of trying to stabilize the program. We really appreciate that. As you know, we've been involved for all 6 cycles, the 26 rural counties. Really appreciate the focus on aging populations and bringing that into the mix. Also want to support Jonathan's comments on leveraging. I think that he made some good points there, and we're supportive of that. The only concern I have is this addition or integration of housing into the program, scoring criteria potentially. I think that gets away from stabilizing the program and further complicates the application, and will further make the program overall more competitive and difficult for rural, smaller communities. Thanks, Lori. And thanks for all your work on this program. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Woody. So I think on the first point that you and Nafili brought up about the smaller projects, and I think I'll work with maybe you and Nafili to see how we can frame that as something to discuss in the workshops. And then, yeah, we will talk about housing a little bit more later. And thank you for your other comment.
Up next, we have Eric Cow.
Good morning. This is Eric Cowell from CVAG. Just a comment. When we talked about reference to active transportation programs, just a comment on safety. A lot of cities have spent considerable time and energy on local road safety plans in the past year because of the Federal Highway HSIP program that now requires those. And in many of the cases that we're seeing, these do have direct linkages to bicycle and pedestrian and ATP type projects. And just a thought that may want to include that type of a reference as well.
Thank you. I think you're referring to that we'll be scoring on if a project is in a plan, and we'll make that a major topic at a later workshop. And that's exactly the kind of comment that we want to hear, that would be a good type of plan to include as a plan that we want to see projects in. I think that's what you're getting at. Did I get that right? Okay. Thank you.
I see no other attendees with their hands raised at this time. We do have several written comments that have been submitted during this period. The first comes from Teresa. She asks, are active transportation plans required? Are campus or community long-range plans adequate? Yes, so she asks, are active transportation plans required? Are campus or community long-range plans adequate?
Okay, so they could be adequate. We'll talk about that with stakeholders when that's a major topic, and we'll put that out ahead of time. And it might be next workshop. I'll get together with Beverly and Alika and see what we should talk about next workshop, and we'll put that specifically out in our materials that we send out ahead of time. And like I told Eric, the last person that spoke, that's exactly, we want to get at what kind of plans are out there that people think are appropriate to include in as a plan for active transportation project to be in. So thank you.
Next comment comes from Diana Mihan. She writes in support of the set aside for non-infrastructure. The next comment comes from Lauren Ledbetter. She writes, regarding aligning ATP funding to housing goals, please explain how the alignment would work and how aligning would support housing goals.
We'll be getting to that in the next segment.
Next comment comes from Jeff Knowles. They write, CTC may want to consider partial points for projects included in a public draft, but not yet approved, adopted active transportation or similar plans.
Okay, that's a good suggestion. Thank you.
Next question comes from Victoria Cacciatore. She asks, for the non-infrastructure set aside, is there a distinction of whether that is only for standalone non-infrastructure programs?
Victoria, the sentiment is that is for standalone non-infrastructure. We have actually seen an increase in projects that are infrastructure with non-infrastructure, but the desire for the set aside is specifically for standalone non-infrastructure projects.
Next question comes from Alyssa Begley. She asks, please talk more about discussing local ordinances for large transformative projects. Clarify that local ordinance allows the transformative project or something else.
I'm actually going to let Beverly take that one because she's been working on this with our executive director. So she probably has more information on this than me. Sorry.
That's okay. So this is something that we'll be working on with the working group as well. So really, we're just trying to kind of, currently the transformative projects question asks stakeholders to talk about like local policies that help support the transformative nature of a project. And so one of the things that we're kind of wondering about is what kind of more specifically local ordinances do agencies have that that kind of help support the transformative nature of the project. And what we mean by that is, do they have, for example, bike parking ordinances? So, you know, you're putting in these great new bike lanes. Will people have a place to park their bike? Or maybe there's ordinances on large employers having bike facilities for their employees. So this is kind of what we're thinking. We'll obviously discuss this more with the group. And we also know that not all of our applicants control local ordinances. So that's something we'll be thinking about as we integrate this topic into the application. And hopefully that answers your question.
Next question comes from Derek Bailey. They ask, is there consideration for downscope projects between statewide and small urban rural?
That's interesting. I'd like to hear more about that. So who was it, Justin?
Derek Bailey.
Okay, Derek, if you could send me or all three of us an email on that, and I'm kind of interested in what you're thinking about that, and then we can work with you and possibly bring that back as a topic for future workshop. Thank you for that.
Next, from Jeff Knowles, they write, please allow an adopted regional definition of a DAC to receive 0 to 4 points. Currently, the scoring is 0 or 1 point.
Yes, it is. Okay, we can talk about that. Let's talk about that at a future workshop. We will have workshop specifically on the applications and the scoring rubric. So we can talk about that in a guidelines workshop too, but we can also get into it more when we are in our workshop specifically for the application and scoring rubric. So thank you.
Next comment comes from Keith Williams. They write, Caltrans highways often serve as main streets in small urban areas where there is often minimal funding for transformative active transportation projects. However, Caltrans is able to now introduce some complete streets improvements with SHOP funding. Small urban rural communities would like to use CT Complete Streets SHOP as leverage for transformative AT projects.
Okay, thank you, Keith. So that's come up a couple times. So I'm hearing that that is a topic that we will discuss under leveraging in a future workshop. So thank you, Keith.
Next comment comes from Lauren Ledbetter. They write, strongly support methods that recognizes the wide difference in transportation, housing, and cost of living throughout the state. Using state or federal cutoffs to define low income eliminates many areas in the state where these costs are high and people are dealing with real affordability and transportation cost issues.
Justin, actually, can you repeat that one?
Yes, they write, strongly support methods that recognizes the wide difference in transportation, housing, and cost of living throughout the state. Using state or federal cutoffs to define low income eliminates many areas in the state where these costs are high and people are dealing with real affordability and transportation cost issues.
Thank you, Justin. So this is under the disadvantaged communities question, and we have multiple ways to for an applicant to show that they have a disadvantaged community that their project is benefiting. And if you could provide a follow-up on that, if you're suggesting a different one or if you're supporting the ones that we currently have, if you want to.
Lauren Ledbetter also comments, support using local roadway safety plans or Vision Zero plans as the type of plan that would earn extra points. Also, any feasibility studies, streetscape plans, or area plans that support a project.
Thank you, Lauren.
Next, from Raman Nakui, they write, for cities that are mid-size or larger that don't have many areas that are disadvantaged, what are our options given that in cycles past, we don't stand a chance to get funded if we don't meet this criteria? For cities that are mid-size or larger that don't have many areas that are disadvantaged, what are our options given that in cycles past, we don't stand a chance to get funded if we don't meet this criteria?
Okay, so I'm not sure what the city size matters, but so we have multiple ways that you can qualify to, like I said, for you, if your project benefits a disadvantaged community. So you can use median household income, free and reduced price meals at schools, Cal and Fiber screen. Right now we're using a regional definition, or you can use an other. And so, so those are the different ways that you can qualify for a disadvantaged community. If you can't qualify, I will agree with you. Last cycle, the cutoff for the statewide program was a 92. There's 10 points for a disadvantaged community. So if you were not able to get any of those points, then you would not have gotten funded in the statewide. So what I would ask that person is, if you have a particular project, why don't you schedule a site visit with Alika, and we can talk about it some more specifically, and see if there's what we can get at more specifically, what's going on with that particular project.
Next, from Alexander Fung, they ask, are there any considerations of putting a maximum funding request amount in this cycle? In cycle 5, several projects that scored really highly took quite a lot of funding awards and did not leave much funding left for other projects that scored quite highly.
Justin, what was that person's name again?
Alexander Fung.
Okay. Okay, thank you for that comment, Alexander. That is a kind of a hot topic, very interesting topic going on now. And we actually talked about this with our technical advisory committee, if we should do that. And there was not, we decided against proposing that. That doesn't mean that a stakeholder couldn't propose that. But I will tell you, while commission staff supports trying to continue funding a range of projects, there is an awful lot of push to fund larger projects. And so I guess I would say we can talk about that at a workshop, but just keep in mind the points that I just made on that.
Next comment comes from Dave Campbell. He writes in support of non-infrastructure projects. Next up from Jan LePage. They write, looking forward to more discussion of the non-infrastructure set-aside, supportive of consideration of this as it was an important tool for behavior change in cycle 1. Thank you for all your work on ATP.
Thank you, Dave and Jeannie.
Deanna Mihan writes, second Lauren Ledbetter's comment about recognition differences in cost of housing.
Thank you.
Teresa writes, her question is, do you have any records of the actual implementation rates of projects funded? Are agencies with outstanding projects, meaning overdue, not being eligible for new funding?
Can you repeat that, Justin?
They ask, do you have any records of the actual implementation rates of projects funded? Are agencies with outstanding projects not being eligible for new funding?
Sorry, I'm muting and unmuting and I'm getting confused. So I'm not sure I totally understand the question, but let me say we have more records than you could ever imagine on everything in the ATP, and one of them is implementation, and Caltrans has a lot of those records. I don't know off the top of my head how many projects are completed. I don't know if either Beverly or Lincoln remembers right now. Most of the cycle 1 projects are completed. We have a lot of projects going on. We have a whole reporting process. So we do have all kinds of data, and we do a quarterly report on the program that comes to the commission that incorporates a lot of that delivery information. The ATP actually has a very, very good delivery record, and that's thanks to all of the implementers and Caltrans for working so hard on getting their projects implemented. I think that you are asking if there is some sort of penalty if you have had an issue in your implementation. We have not done that so far. We are considering reducing points only in extreme situations of implementation issues. And what I mean by that is if a project was audited and there was audit findings where basically something like the implementer took the funds and did not implement the project, or they built some project that wasn't what they submitted. It would be something like that. I hope I sort of answered that.
From Adam Fukushima, he asks, do you anticipate any changes to DAC definitions, especially for a local definition of DAC? Thanks for this webinar and all you do on this great program.
Oh boy, well, Okay. So commission staff was not going to propose any changes to the disadvantaged communities, any part of it this cycle. We talked about that with our management and with the technical advisory committee, and there just was not a desire to go to discuss that this cycle. Now, if stakeholders want to, we will. But those of you that have been with the program know that the disadvantaged communities question can be very contentious, and it can take over the conversation around the program. So I think, Adam, we can talk more about that, and if stakeholders would like to revisit it, we will. But be cautioned about what you ask for.
Regarding Lori's comment about an effort to fund higher cost projects, does this mean you're looking to discourage lower cost projects, especially non-infrastructure projects, from applying?
No. So I will clarify that, and this is commission staff's perspective, we would like to continue to fund a variety of projects. And we've been able to do that even with splitting out the types of projects. Even in last cycle where we had some very large projects, we still had a decent spread between small, medium, large, non-infrastructure, and plant. We would like to continue that. I would say that it does get harder and harder because the large projects can show a lot of benefits, but I think what I meant is that we do get some outside, sometimes some outside push for the larger projects, and I think that's probably because those are the ones that can show mode shift and that are more likely to reduce GHG. But just to reiterate, commission staff supports all the projects. We think that most of our projects that we get are all really great projects. And we would like to continue funding all the different kinds as much as possible.
Next question comes from Diana Meehan. She asks, would CTC staff be willing to consider doing a state of the program for ATP, a report on cycles, successes, challenges, and how it has been supported and advanced the goals for active transportation in the state?
I would say that we do that to a certain extent every year in our annual report. And that will be coming out, I think, in December. And that's where we talk about our accomplishments and kind of give a background on our delivery and things like that. So we do that every year in the annual report. And then we also have like I said, the quarterly report that talks more about the program too.
We have one attendee with their hand raised at this time. Eric Cowell, you're free to unmute yourself and make your comment.
Okay, thank you so much, Justin. And thank you. Those were some really, really great ideas and comments and questions. I wish I could see all of you, but thank you for that. And I think so. We are going to go to what's next, Alika? Okay, so now we are going to talk about housing with Josh. Rosa is going to give a presentation, and then we will go back to discussion after that.
Great, thanks, Lori. So yes, we are going to talk about state housing goals. So as many of you know, during cycle 5, we worked with the Department of Housing and Community Development to better align the program with state housing goals. And we did a few things to the cycle 5 application to help with this goal. So in the disadvantaged communities question, we added language about displacement. So applicants had to talk about displacement. And also in the large infrastructure application, applicants were asked to discuss the potential of the project to support planned housing, especially affordable housing, and the transformative projects question. So we're continuing to collaborate with HCD to discuss how we could further address state housing goals. And so today we have Josh Rosa from HCD to present on their pro-housing designation program. So after his presentation, you will have the opportunity to ask some questions, and then we will also present what commission staff has been thinking about on how to kind of integrate this into the program. So I will now hand things over to Josh.
Josh, are you there? So it might take us a minute to get Josh back on. So just hang in there, everyone.
Josh, it doesn't look like we
Hi,
can
can folks see
hear.
me now?
Yes, sir. We can see and hear you
Or
clearly.
hear me now? All right, we made it work. Good morning. This is Josh Rosa from the Department of Housing and Community Development. And I want to thank the commission staff for allowing us the opportunity to share some potential concepts for the 2023 cycle. These concepts utilize HCD's recently launched pro-housing designation program to work with local communities and provide support, evaluation, and incentives for adopting housing supportive policies. Next slide, please. So first and most importantly, as Beverly was mentioning, these concepts build on a history of previous CTC HCD collaboration. In the last cycle, our department worked collaboratively with the commission to expand upon the scoring topic in ATP for transformative projects. This included asking applicants to address the potential for the project to support existing and planned housing, especially affordable housing. For ATP planning funds, the 2021 guidelines also included links and resources for other available related planning grant opportunities, including HCD's SB2 planning grant program and the local early action planning grant program. And we asked applicants to coordinate their active transportation planning with local housing planning activities. This work has been focused on bringing closer integration to active transportation planning with local land use and housing planning. So for the 2023 cycle, we're working with CTC staff to propose ways of linking to a new state incentive program that defines, guides, and verifies local housing policies. Next slide, please. Pro housing is the new tool in our toolbox. this program defines the types of local policies that advance state priorities for housing, climate change, and equity. And the pro-housing program creates incentives for cities and counties to adopt these policies. Upon request by any local government, HCD will evaluate and verify that local government's adoption of these criteria. And local governments that adopt pro-housing criteria will receive extra credit in the scoring of competitive funding programs. At least 4 other competitive state funding programs will give additional points or other preferences to communities that participate in the pro-housing program. And it uses an objective and uniform process of evaluating each community's local policies in light of defined goals. This creates a way for any state fund to precisely target and support the types of local policies that align with its program objectives. Next slide, please. HCD worked with a wide range of stakeholders for over a year to design, iterate, and finalize the pro-housing regulation starting in 2019. The pro-housing criteria that are adopted reflect the expertise, perspectives, and research of program collaborators, all anchored around several overarching goals. Next slide, please. Those overarching goals of pro-housing include increasing development capacity, variety, and streamlining, promoting equitable communities, collaborating to align policies and programs, implementing housing statutes, and planning consistent with the state priorities. Next slide. And when we say state priorities, we're referring to the integrated planning and development to facilitate location efficient communities and planning consistent with the AB 857 priorities and SCSs. Next slide, please. So to advance these overarching goals, the pro-housing regulation defines 39 local policy types that qualify as pro-housing policies. These include evidence-based measures in 4 categories: zoning and land use, accelerating production, reducing construction costs, and providing financial subsidies. Local communities can consider this a menu of options, choosing to adopt the ones that make sense for their particular community. Next slide, please. In addition to those 39 pro-housing policies, the program also defines 8 enhancement factors, which are additional actions that communities can take to tie their policies to state goals, including location efficiency, climate change mitigation, fair housing, and measures to prevent displacement. So altogether, pro-housing establishes a total of 47 criteria, and each criterion has a point value. Next slide, please. And the local community that can receive, that can reach 30 points will receive the pro-housing designation. They can reach the 30-point minimum through any combination of criteria, so long as they touch all 4 categories. And, you know, every local community is different, and different criteria will be feasible for different communities. So pro-housing is designed for flexibility, establishing a diverse variety of actions a community could take to advance these goals. Next slide, please. So here, I mentioned that there's 4 categories, and I thought I might just quickly zip through each of those 4 categories to just show a couple of examples, just to, I think, ground this and make it a little bit more real. So the category of favorable zoning and land use has more than 3 pro-housing policies, but I just want to pull out these 3 to give folks a sense of the sort of thing that that the pro-housing regulation is establishing. Next slide, please. A few more examples here in the category of accelerating production timeframes. And again, these are actions that a local government could take to demonstrate that they are speeding up the processes involved in housing production. Next slide, please. And then this is the third category of reducing construction and development costs. Again, a local government doesn't have to score a significant number of points in every category. They would actually only need to meet one criterion in each category. So they could go really big in some categories and then not score as highly in other categories. So long as they get to that 30-point minimum total, then they would get the designation. So this is the way that pro-housing can be impactful, but also flexible, and let each community become pro-housing in its own way. Next slide, please. This is that final category of criteria, providing financial subsidies. Next slide, please. So there's also really kind of a fifth category of enhancement factors. And these are additional actions that a local community could take on top of the pro-housing policy that ties it more closely to state established goals. And there's a total of 8 enhancement factors in the regulation. I just want to pull up these 2 in particular just as examples for actions that a local government could take. And you'll see that these in particular are promoting location efficiency. Next slide, please. So here's an example of a local government that actually achieves the pro-housing designation through its own combination of pro-housing criteria. When a community applies to the pro-housing program, HCD will evaluate it and complete a preliminary checklist indicating which criteria are met. And if the local government doesn't get up to the 30-point minimum, the application just stays alive, and our department continues to work with the local community toward meeting other criteria and eventually getting over that 30 points to get the designation. It's a rolling basis that doesn't close the file, so to speak, on any particular application. Next slide, please. So our department is investing in helping local communities participate. We've already been engaging with dozens of local governments, conducting regional and statewide workshops and developing instructional and other guidance documents. And we really recognize the crucial importance of building these on-ramps for all communities to have an opportunity, as increasingly state funding programs will be prioritizing pro-housing communities in the years ahead. Next slide, please. And that's it. Happy to help with any questions, interested in feedback and thoughts and opinions.
We do have several attendees indicating they wish to make public comment at this time. Up first, we have Josh Lee.
It is Josh from SBCTA. Thanks for the presentation, Josh. So we've been working quite a bit with HCD staff in our county to work on a lot of different housing elements for our jurisdictions. And we've had this conversation several times, but I think for tying it to ATP, there's two main concerns. One is the schedule for some of our cities, as they're trying to adopt the housing element by February. But then again, the passage of AB 1398 kind of pushed it out to October for rezoning purposes. So that kind of conflicts with the ATP submittal date of June. So I think that's I think schedule-wise, it might not be, our jurisdictions might not be able to kind of meet that pro-housing designation requirements. So that's one. The other one is in terms of just getting those 30 points. It's more of a question, Josh. Have you guys done an analysis of some of the housing elements that have been submitted to you guys and run the checklist and see if they're meeting that 30 point? Because what we're finding out is that even some of our jurisdictions that have a very pro-housing policies and pro-housing ordinances, it's very tight to beat that 30-point deadline, third point requirement. So I think it'll be helpful if at least some examples have been given that of the jurisdictions that have met that 30-point requirements. So thanks. But we are in full support of ATP eventually having some kind of housing nexus. I think that's super helpful. So just wanted to throw that in there. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you for those comments. And yeah, happy to help with that question. As the pro-housing criteria were being established as part of the regulation, our department did consult a representative sample of local governments to see how they match up with the local policies that those governments had on the books. And we found that a number of local governments could score the minimum 30 points to get the designation just walking in the door, filling out the application. Other local communities would have to take additional actions above and beyond their housing element. And that's by design. That pro-housing really does set a high bar very intentionally. It goes beyond the requirements of state housing element law, while at the same time giving local governments flexibility to basically exceed what's required by the law in a way that best accommodates your particular community. That's really the goal. But yeah, it's a high bar to get to the 30 points. There's a few alternatives that at this early point in the program we are exploring, which could be maybe establishing a point total that could be available to communities that have the designation, but there could also be points available to communities that haven't received the designation yet, but they have applied and they have met certain criteria. They just haven't gotten to the 30 points yet. But if they're participating and they have an application alive with our department, then that could be something that they could get credit for, especially at this early point. And I think to your point about the timing, that might be a more appropriate approach. But we're really interested in continuing to hear from stakeholders and work with folks toward figuring out the right approach at this early stage.
And can I ask one more question? It's actually for more for the CTC staff, but if there are multi-jurisdictional projects, of course, if one jurisdiction has pro-housing designation versus the other, how would that type of project be considered in this cycle? And also regional entities like SBCTA, who often apply for the ATP, we don't get to control any of the housing legislation or housing ordinances in jurisdictions. So how are the regional entities going to be handling this is the other question. Thanks.
So Josh, thank you. So Josh Lee, I'm talking to. After we hear some more questions, we are going to, Beverly is going to present what our proposal for this cycle. But I'll tell you, I hadn't even thought about multi-jurisdictional projects. That is a really good question. So that's something else to consider. So thank you, Josh. That is a really good point. Back to you, Justin.
Up next, we have Lauren Ledbetter.
Hi, did you say Lauren Ledbetter?
Yes.
Oh, hi, thanks. Thanks for explaining this. I just wanted to clarify what I heard. I'm not a land use planner. So it sounds like communities would apply to get this pro-housing designation, and in order to do so, they need to get 30 points. And then based on that, they would receive some points on the ATP. Is that correct? Or that's kind of what's being discussed right now?
What's being discussed right now is Josh is presenting the program. And then we will talk about what we're proposing to incorporate in the active transportation program for this cycle.
Okay, okay, got it. So it hasn't been defined yet. And I think Josh had mentioned that linking the pro housing designation to other competitive grant programs has been done. And if that's the case, could you explain how effective that's been in getting people to update their policies, or what other types of programs they are? Is it being linked to competitive funding for housing, for example? And that's my last question.
Yeah, happy to help with that. So the statute that created the Pro Housing Designation Program in 2019 also designates 3 competitive state funding programs that will award additional points or other preferences to communities that participate in the pro housing program. So from the very start, it's designed to be an incentive program. So those 3 programs are the Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities Program, the Transformative Climate Communities Program, and the Infill Infrastructure Grant Program. And in addition to that, the Climate Action Plan for Transportation Infrastructure identifies other programs that will consider incorporating pro housing in one way or another. And the one that happens to be first sequentially in its program update process is the Transit and Intercity Rail Capital Program. And so those are the 4 that are currently doing this work. It's still very new. So the pro housing regulation was just adopted in July, and the 4 funding programs I mentioned have yet to adopt their final guidelines that incorporate this. In fact, the TIRCP program is the farthest ahead, and they have draft guidelines out right now that incorporate pro housing incentives. But until calls for projects go out and applications come in and we go through project selection, it's difficult to say what the direct outcomes will be. We're getting a lot of interest among local governments who are preparing to apply. A handful of local governments have applied for the pro housing designation, but we're still pretty early in this process.
Thank you. That was really helpful.
Up next, we have Harrison Taylor.
Hi, yes, my name is Harrison Taylor. I'm the president of the Open Space Foundation in San Juan Capistrano. This is my first ATP call, and I appreciate everyone's efforts, and it's very informative. One of my questions actually was just answered by Josh, so I appreciate that. I guess what we, the Open Space Foundation, are trying to do, and the reason I'm on this call today is we're looking for a public-private partnership where we can work with our local city and county to propose, pedestrian and bicycle connectivity throughout our town where it's missing connectivity. So I guess one of my questions was, does our local city, which would be San Juan Capistrano, have to meet those 30 points theoretically in order for us to be considered, I guess, in the ATP 2023 program? Or that's to be decided, I guess. Is that, Lori, is that what you're saying? That's to come in the next comment?
Yes.
Or in the next, yeah, okay.
Yes.
And have you seen in the past, I guess, where there's been a public-private partnership of this kind of sort? Or is it just simply led 100% by the, by the city or county?
So some of the stakeholders might have good responses to this too, but I would say that you're a private nonprofit. Private nonprofits, am I correct on that?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
501c3.
Okay. Okay, so private nonprofits are eligible for a small part of the funds in the ATP, which is the recreational trails part of the funding. So, but that's only a very small part of our funding sources. So generally, I would say that you would do better in partnering with somebody, like you said, like a city. to do the project. But I would encourage you to get in touch with Alika, and we could do a site visit and talk more about your project because it sounds very interesting.
Okay, thank you very much.
Up next, we have Teresa Wycliffe on the line, looking to make comment. You are unmuted and free to speak. Teresa? Okay, up next, we have Carl Anderson.
Again, Carl Anderson with Metropolitan Transportation Commission. Thank you, Josh, for the very detailed presentation. Very useful. I'm supportive of the intent. However, I think it's premature to score ATP projects or award additional extra credit points to these projects that qualify as a pro-housing city. I don't even know how many cities throughout California are designated as a pro-housing city, so I think it'd be useful to see a list of that, or a list of counties or whoever. This is relatively new, like you've said, and cities, I feel that cities don't really haven't had a chance to meet this designation. But if the CTC is adamant about including something this cycle related to pro-housing, I recommend we include a question in the application about what policies a city has in place to support housing under these guidelines. That way we can assess what it could look like in the future if we do decide to score on this piece. And it could be something like where we include a section now in the guidelines saying that scoring could be a part of the 2025 ATP, like we did with the AT plan requirement in previous cycles.
Yeah, thank you for that. So just to clarify, there is not a list of local governments that have gotten the designation because nobody has gotten the designation yet. So this is a very new program. We just adopted the regulation and invited applications in July. So since then, several local governments have applied for the designation, and those applications are under review. And other jurisdictions have been in correspondence with our department while they prepare their applications. But yeah, at this point, there's nobody who has a designation. And but you know, ultimately in most of these competitive funding programs, applicants are competing against one another. So hypothetically, if nobody has the designation, it's not a detriment to any other applicant. But yeah, just to answer your question, right now there is not a there's not, but there will be a list posted as designations actually are granted.
Okay, and are applications accepted on a rolling basis, or is it just kind of like a once every year or 2-year cycle? What's that look like, Josh?
Rolling basis.
Okay.
And yeah, any local community can get in touch by emailing prohousingpolicies@hcd.ca.gov. And applying is really just starting a conversation with the department. So the department would have 60 days to evaluate the application and get back with initial feedback. But from there on, the application remains on file, and the department will continue working with the local community toward those 30 points.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we're going to give Teresa another try. Teresa, you're free to unmute yourself and make your comment. Teresa, you're free to unmute yourself and make your comment. Okay, we're going to go ahead and move on to Kenneth Ryan. Kenneth, you're free to unmute yourself and make your comment. Kenneth? Okay, Up next, we have Harrison Taylor. Harrison, you are free to mute yourself.
Oh, I apologize. I asked my question already. I'll lower my hand. Thank you.
Okay. Up next, we have Luis Sal. Luis, you're free to unmute yourself. Luis Sal, you're free to unmute yourself and make your comment.
Oh, sorry, I missed my name earlier. This is Louis OCTA. Josh, thank you for the presentation again. I made my comment yesterday at the LPP workshop as well, again, about the barriers, and I think a lot of my questions has been asked by my regional partners at MTC, Carl and SBCTA Josh. I am a little bit concerned about how this will apply to us as a regional agency, and especially with projects that cross jurisdictional boundaries. You know, at OCTA, we tend to plan regional-based bikeways. We try to assist our agencies in making sure that we can at least set up the projects as best we can so they can compete well in the ATP program. And often means bridging the gaps between multiple jurisdictions. And I'm curious to hear how it's gonna be scored when one agency has a pro-housing designation and one agency doesn't. And the other thing for us in the planning purposes side, we want to make sure that that list is accessible. And I'm glad to hear that it will be posted, because when we're looking at planning for projects, it makes it a lot easier for us to know in advance what the program is going to look like and what we're going to be judged on and what projects would be competitive within ATP. So that's my comment. Thank you.
Yeah, no, that's really appreciated. The question of the interjurisdictional applications is a very reasonable one, and I think that that's something for us to continue exploring with CTC staff. I know that there are other programs with more regional projects that are evaluated that encounter these same issues. I think that in those cases, a lot of it might just depend on the narrative in the application, explaining why, if it's a particular local jurisdiction that has the pro-housing designation, why that's uniquely relevant to the project being considered. But I think that a lot of that conversation still has to occur, and it's something that we continue looking forward to discussing with stakeholders and fleshing that out.
Teresa was experiencing audio issues. She submitted a written comment. I will read that on her behalf at this time. She asks, can Josh please describe how the UC campuses were involved in this process? Are these campuses applying for pro-housing designation programs? Also, how will agencies like UCs or other non-city or non-county agencies apply for ATP and now are at a disadvantage in scoring? Thank you.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. And I should clarify, I didn't mean to imply that UC will be involved in applying for pro-housing designations. The applicants for pro-housing will be cities and counties. So those are the two entities that can apply and get the pro-housing designation. And UC was just cited in, I think it might have been the second slide, about program collaborators. Their research teams were part of the input that we solicited and worked with in the development of the pro-housing regulation over the fall of 2019 and then the summer of 2020. Does that, I think that answers the question, but I want to make sure I understood it correctly.
Let me step in too, Josh. So Teresa, to answer, that is going to be the biggest issue is a lot of our applicants don't have housing jurisdiction, but we'll talk about that more when we get to our proposal.
Next, we have Keith Williams.
Good morning. Yeah, I think integrating housing with ATP really makes sense, and you know, and the concept is generally good. I feel like we're gravitating. This conversation is gravitating a lot towards the details of the proposal, and I feel like it really doesn't make too much sense to discuss this before hearing the proposal. So I would love to hear the proposal.
Well, Keith, I'll tell you, there was a reason that we set it up this way. But Justin, do you have more comments? Okay.
We do have a few more attendees with their hand raised at this time. Up next, I'd like to call on Woodrow Deloria.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks, Josh, for the great presentation. Woodrow Deloria with El Dorado County Transportation Commission and the Rural Counties Task Force. You mentioned that there was a case study done for some of the counties or cities that essentially have eligibility kind of already under wraps now. Were any of those rural counties or rural cities?
Yeah, I'd have to get back to you with the details, but I do know that the sampling was intended to be representative. So I think that we did try to include communities of all types.
Okay. And as I mentioned earlier, I just am concerned as Lori led off the presentation this morning with the desire to kind of stabilize the program. Adding another layer of these housing metrics to the program may further impact rural counties' ability to compete. Josh, I don't know if you're aware, but there have been some rural counties that have just done a great job in competing and submitting great applications and programs, projects. However, a lot of rural counties have really struggled to compete in this highly competitive program with the lack of disadvantaged communities and other metrics that are more urban centric in nature. And just concerned that adding another layer of that will further disadvantage our rural counties. So, and also the concern, I've heard the concern mentioned, but those cross-jurisdictional projects, how that would work. And a lot of our rural regional transportation planning agencies have no land use authority. So it would add another layer of coordination, which isn't always bad, but would certainly add more time, more resource requirements for those small rural agencies who often have one or two staff. So thanks for that.
Thank you.
Up next, we have Victoria Cacciatore.
Hi, I had a question about how long does it normally take, or might you imagine it would take, for processing the new applications? With the other funding programs you mentioned, I would say that there's a smaller subset of applicants to those programs, whereas there are a lot of agencies throughout the state of California that apply for ATP funding. And I could see it being a tremendous workload for HCD staff. Additionally, I only know of one agency in my region that has applied for the pro housing designation or gone through the exercise with you. I understand they were not cleared for it because there were some follow-up questions, but that means that there are many more cities and counties that would be looking to work with you for.
Yeah, it's kind of a be careful what you wish for scenario. We're certainly, I think, prepared, and we're building out staff capacity to review a high number of applications. We're bound by the regulation to respond within 60 days of receiving an application with preliminary feedback, just saying, oh, here's the criteria that we've substantiated you meet, here's the criteria that we have additional questions about. And from that point on, it becomes an ongoing dialogue with the applicant. So right now it's very manageable, given it's only a 4-month-old program, and we've only gotten a handful of applications in. But we are prepared to handle a large number. The most it could possibly be is 540, right? And I don't think it'll ever get that high, but yeah, I think that we're up for it. Our department's growing very, very fast.
Next, we have Kenneth Ryan. Kenneth, you're now muted and free to comment.
Hello, hi. Is everybody, are you hearing me? Because I came in earlier and nobody seemed to hear me. Good, okay, thanks, hi. I want to understand what I'm hearing from your housing side of this. You want people to score up 30 points or more. What is the point of, is that a cutoff? You won't consider applications for funds if they don't make 30 points? What's the significance of that 30 points? And why should a city bother, especially a small city or a rural city? And coming back, since I have the floor for the moment, into the transportation side of this, we are looking, as I understand it, or certainly what I'm looking for, is attention to seniors, which means essentially safe walking. The best exercise a senior can get is walking. And that means sidewalks. And the sidewalks tend to be the things that are forgotten about. The housing people didn't say a word about exercise or walking or whatever to get to your shopping from the housing that you're putting through. So the connectivity is what I'm looking for. And are we as a group in this website going to work fundamentally on non-automobile connectivity, which is what the rules are, and how are we going to make sure that sidewalks get taken care of, because they certainly are not being taken care of in rural areas, and the pullouts for buses along the two-lane rural highways are in many places mud baths. So while Caltrans has money available for these pullouts or for use and other alternatives, I don't see in our discussion at the moment the connectivity of our program and the connectivity planning program that Caltrans puts out. There's a parallel program going on right now for Caltrans to do studying of non-highway processes. So where's the connectivity between the Caltrans planning and our program planning and the housing? I mean, the net result is getting people safely from their home or their apartment to their shopping or church or whatever needs outside the house. And that connectivity, I think, needs to get focused into our planning projects for the next cycle. So I wanted to get all of that in one shot since I've got the microphone. But thank you. I really appreciate all of the work you're all doing. It's a difficult process getting a connectivity thing to go. I also would like to have comments from whoever would do it on what kind of input are you putting to the governor's program that he plans to announce the end of December on becoming a smart senior, I guess is my phrase of it. In effect, taking care of people as they age, as these processes go on. Apparently, we're going to have a major process come out of the governor's office by the end of December. I know they've asked all agencies to connect on this and give their input. I haven't seen anything from either of your two agencies talking about the input that you plan to give the governor on this smart aging process in California. So anyone who wants to take a shot at it, be my guest. Thank you for taking my time.
Thanks, Ken. Josh, do you want to see what you can answer, and then I'll jump in and respond to Ken on some of his other points.
Yeah,
okay.
Happy to. And yeah, Ken, thank you for those thoughts, and that's really valuable input, and you raised important questions. And, you know, I think one of the things that I probably could have been more attentive to in talking about pro-housing is that it's really focused on complete communities. So not just housing units for housing units' sake, but also creating a wider variety of development types for communities that want denser housing and more vibrant communities with active transportation. The program does reward policies that reduce the cost of active transportation infrastructure. So whether that's building new bike lanes, protected bike lanes, or expanding or repairing sidewalks, or creating on-street parking facilities for bicycles, or transit-related improvements, those are all activities that a local government gets credit for in the pro-housing program. So we try to be attentive to that. I guess that there were a variety of other things. I think that you were also mentioning the master plan for aging. I know that that's not really a topic of today's webinar, but I'll just kind of opine briefly that the Business and Consumer Services and Housing Agency is a part of the master plan for aging implementation. And there is some documentation on our actions that are available with the Department of Aging's website. So I'd be happy to direct you there, and maybe even, you know, I'd be happy to follow up with you after this meeting to kind of connect you with the right staff for the master plan for aging. But I think that's all I got. I really appreciate your thoughtful and thorough comments and questions.
I thank you. Well, the thing I can think of from housing is, how do people get around the parking lots? Are you going to put pass sidewalks in to get out of the? Are you recommending that sort of thing for coming for avoiding automobiles if you wish to get out to the sidewalk or the bus stop? Is there going to be a bus stop recommended for a development community? All of this, I just think, has to be in your recommendations. That's all.
Thank you.
So Ken, I'll step into on the, it sounds like Josh is saying that the effort that you say is that's coming out in December is the master plan on aging, which I do know about.
Yeah,
And
yeah, you know, go ahead.
And that's why, so if you remember earlier in our presentations today, we talked about that we wanted to incorporate consideration of aging populations more in the program, and that is a direct result of that master plan on aging. We met with the Department of Aging a couple times, and they're helping us come up with good language, and so yeah, we are considering that. And Ken, you know, I know you have been involved with the program for a long time, and you have a lot of knowledge on seniors in rural areas. So we are really happy to get your feedback on how we can incorporate that in this cycle too.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Ken.
Up next, we have Louis Zhao. Louis, you're free to unmute yourself and make your comment. Louis, please excuse me, but your audio is coming in a little bit garbled at the moment. We cannot hear you clearly. Yeah, still having the issue. I would recommend disconnecting and reconnecting if you can.
Sorry, Louis, you were sounding like Beelzebub for a minute there.
That concludes all attendees looking to make public comment at this time. We can follow up with Louis once he gets his issues resolved.
Okay, so I'm gonna shut up and let Beverly take over again.
So thank you so much, Josh, for your presentation today. It was really helpful. And so just to provide more context, Commission staff wanted to present the group with some very preliminary language for how we might incorporate pro-housing into the program. We've been thinking about ways to integrate, next slide, yeah, thanks, Alika. We've been thinking about ways that we can integrate pro-housing into the program, but in a way that, in the way that we usually integrate new concepts into the program. So on the screen is some potential new language in bold underline for the guidelines, and only on the transformative projects question. So if you recall, the transformative projects question is only in the large infrastructure and large combination project application. So of course, we'll present this language to you, and then of course we want to hear more of your comments and feedback after we present this. So I can just read this for everyone and then kind of explain more about our rationale for this language. So just to reiterate, the language that's not in bold underline is already part of the guidelines. So we already referenced housing and affordable housing. So this is really just expanding on that. So the guidelines that we were suggesting that the guidelines might read, evidence of the transformative nature of the project will help inform the score. In addition, applicants should address the potential for the project to support existing and planned housing, especially affordable housing, and show evidence of comprehensive community planning, zoning, and design standards supporting location-efficient development that encourages walking and biking. Applicants are encouraged to apply for the California Department of Housing and Community Development Pro-Housing Designation Program, or to describe how local policies align with pro-housing criteria. Starting in the 2025 ATP, applicants may be awarded points for obtaining pro-housing designation. So our kind of rationale here was that it's a pro-housing designation program is a new program. So we don't want to propose making it a requirement, but we do want to encourage our applicants to seek this designation. And that's why we kind of added that language in 2025. It may be a more required component. So we're encouraging people to go seek that designation, and also in the application, encouraging applicants to describe how their local housing policies are beginning to align with this pro-housing framework. So as with most new policy issues that we introduce in the ATP, we really want to take a more kind of slow approach to get people ready to implement this more in the future. And I don't know, Lori, if you kind of want to add on to that.
Sorry, I'm having trouble finding my video. Not yet. I do have some comments I want to make when you're done with this section.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so I think that's all I wanted to present on here. Again, this is very draft language, and we are really eager to hear your comments and your feedback so we can help begin to refine this language. And we can open it up for any comments now.
We have received a written submission from Louis Zhao, who was having audio issues earlier. Louis writes, school districts are eligible under the ATP, and like other regional agencies, do not have housing authority. And that concludes his comment.
Yes, so thank you, Louis, for that comment. And that is something that as we're incorporating this more into our program, we're very aware of that not all of our applicants have any jurisdiction over housing policies. So things like school districts, transit agencies, and then we know we also have a lot of regional agencies that don't control housing policies. So we're definitely going to be thinking about that and working with all of you to make sure that that's considered as we integrate this more.
We have Nafili Barrett looking to make public comment. Nafili, you're free to unmute yourself.
Hi, thank you. Nafili Barrett with the Mendocino Council of Governments. So just a couple comments in general about the pro-housing designation. While, I think it could be a really useful tool in some places for some jurisdictions, it is going to be a burden for a lot of small rural agencies to achieve the designation, even if they already have some of those policies in place that could help qualify them for that designation. Just kind of getting through the red tape of getting the designation is going to be a challenge for agencies that are already short-staffed and completely maxed out. These are agencies that are dealing with things like fire recovery and, implementing things, other things that take up all their time without adding something on top of it that would be to benefit a transportation project, which it wouldn't even necessarily be implemented by that specific agency. I think it's also important to remember that not all areas of California are experiencing growth, and so that's something to keep in mind. Some areas actually are having negative growth. So, and then I also I'm a little concerned about how the greater focus on housing. I am glad to see that the additional points wouldn't be awarded until 2025 at least. That is, I appreciate that. But I'm a little concerned on how this might affect projects in areas that aren't experiencing growth, and therefore there's no great demand for new housing. And then also projects in downtown areas where the housing itself isn't necessarily located. But so for instance, you might have a downtown area that serves a much larger geographic area in a remote community, in a remote area where people are coming into the downtown and then are unable to walk in the downtown because there are no sidewalks, and they're forced to walk in the highway with the traffic. But it's not necessarily going to support housing because the housing is not located in the downtown area. So those projects are also important, and I'm concerned how, I know that only the underlined here is the change, but how this could impact those projects.
Thank you for that. I think those are very helpful questions. And on the topic of communities that are not experiencing growth, I should clarify that the pro-housing program doesn't consider growth. It doesn't actually look at production of housing. It just evaluates the policies that the local community has adopted. So it asks the local community to set the table, and whether housing occurs or not, the pro-housing doesn't hold the local community responsible for that. That's up to the market. And to the other issue of school districts or other ATP applicants who don't have direct land use authority, one thing to consider is that asking ATP applicants to account for housing policies isn't new, right? We did this in the last cycle. So it might be worth looking at how you might have evaluated those criteria in the last cycle. The thing that's new with pro-housing is it's establishing and laying out clear expectations in a uniform evaluation process that might be a source of guidance. But yeah, I mean, again, this is, I think as Beverly was saying, this is a starting point, and happy to keep working with stakeholders to address all the questions.
Can I just comment on the response regarding growth? So I understand that your response, but I guess my point was that if growth isn't happening, it might not seem as pressing to those local agency staff people that are already maxed out to go through the process of achieving that pro-housing status if there are no developers that are going to benefit from it, or it's not going to achieve anything because there's no growth.
Okay, thank you. The next written question comes from Dave Campbell. He writes, what is required with this language in regards to housing?
What's required with the language?
I don't think we understand the question.
So I guess I can expand a little bit. So in the large infrastructure application, applicants are already asked to address housing in the transformative projects section of the application. So this is just large infrastructure, so projects that are $7 million or more. So they're already asked to address this. And so what we are, sorry, I lost my count. So what our rationale is that we would kind of expand on that. So when they're talking about housing, we're asking them to talk about it in more directly related to the pro-housing framework and the policies laid out in the pro-housing framework. So hopefully that makes sense. So essentially, just kind of providing a little bit more of like specific policies that people can discuss that are within this pro-housing framework, and really just expanding on what we already expect of the applicants to address in this question. Hopefully that answers your question. Again, this cycle, commission staff is not proposing to require a pro-housing designation to receive points. We're really just asking applicants to address housing and then address housing policies in the context of the pro-housing framework.
I see that Dave Campbell has raised his hand. Dave, I'm going to unmute you. You are free to unmute yourself and make your comment.
Thanks for trying to clarify my question. I think you did. The answer is nothing this round, and something may happen in a few years, which is fine. That sounds critical, but I'm just trying to get clarity. The reason I'm asking is, and I'm not a housing advocate, I'm a walk, bike, transit advocate. But what I found in our work in Alameda and Contra Costa counties of the Bay Area is if you don't require it, you're not likely to get it. Sometimes you'll get it from supportive jurisdictions. There's some jurisdictions that will always do it, and there's some that won't until you require it. And so think about that. If you want something to happen this time, addressing it, provide evidence of it, discuss it, think about what you're going to get. And if it's applicable to walk bike projects, there's going to be a lot of jurisdictions that won't do it until you require it. So thanks for listening.
Yeah, thank you for that comment. Yes, thanks for that comment. We'll definitely go back and, as I mentioned, in the large infrastructure application, applicants are already required to address housing, and so we're just building on that.
You have a lot more, Justin?
We have a total of 4 more. 2 are hand raised, 2 are not.
Okay. And then I think, so let's take those 4, and then we'll have to wrap up this conversation because we've got to get to our action items before we close. Thank you, Justin.
So next written comment comes from Alyssa Begley. She writes, language needs to address how eligible applicants without housing authorities, such as transit agencies, should address the pro-housing designation and how scoring criteria applies. Next question comes from Brittany White. She asks, could applicants speak to anti-displacement in lieu of pro-housing designation?
For one thing, the pro-housing regulation looks at anti-displacement.
We asked to discuss anti-displacement and the disadvantaged communities question. And Josh, is anti-displacement part of pro-housing?
Yes, can folks hear me?
You're on mute. Oh wait, maybe I just can't hear you. Oh.
Can folks hear me now?
No, I think everyone else could. It's just us. We're playing like musical chairs with our sound here, so there's no sound issues. Go for it.
Okay. Yes, so the pro-housing program does evaluate anti-displacement policies, and it credits local governments for taking any actions that exceed what they're required to do under state law. And then there's a separate criterion that also credits local governments for affirmatively furthering fair housing, which can include anti-displacement as well.
Yeah, thanks, Josh. And again, just to kind of reiterate, anti-displacement is something that you could definitely talk about in this question, even without the pro-housing component of it. This question already asks you to address housing, so definitely that's something that you can bring up in your response.
All right, I'm going to proceed with calling on the two attendees that have their hand raised at this time. Up first will be Carl Anderson, followed by Woodrow Deloria. Carl?
Hi again, Carl Anderson with Metropolitan Transportation Commission. I just want to reiterate something that we've heard time and time again with the ATP, is that it is an extremely hard burden for applicants to fill out this application. And if we are going to be asking for project sponsors, even if it's only in the large application, to provide evidence of something related to community planning, zoning, or design standards, then I just urge the CTC staff to try and find ways in the application this time around to streamline some other questions. I'm sick of hearing from jurisdictions that it costs them $20,000 and $30,000 to hire a consultant to fill out an application. And I know that burden is even exacerbated more with smaller jurisdictions. So if we are adding anything to any questions, I just urge the commission to remove or streamline some other parts of the application. And I understand that this isn't the moment to do that, but we will get to that during the application workshops. And I just want to make sure that I said that today.
Thanks, Carl.
Next, Woodrow Deloria.
Hello again, everyone. I just want to echo what the last speaker said. It's not often that I agree with an MTC perspective, but I'm happy to say that I do today. I just wanted to kind of go back to what Nafili was talking about regarding some of the smaller agencies and expecting that they will, Josh, as you have said, exceed what's required of them currently by the state. I think if I were to present that to some of the smaller jurisdictions, I'd be run out of town in a heartbeat. They're struggling to meet state statutes now, whether funded or unfunded, and to put this level of additional burden on those small jurisdictions is going to further disadvantage those. I keep seeing disadvantage, but further disadvantage those rural and small agencies from competing. So I'll just leave it at that.
Okay, so I'm gonna wrap this up now, because we, like all ATP workshops, we are running very long, and I did want to get to our action items. So I want to thank Josh for being so brave to present today, because the ATP stakeholders always ask really very good, very pointed questions. And I do want to say that Josh and HCD are carrying out what is in the statute for this program. So I want to say that AB 101 says that the department, meaning HCD, shall designate qualifying jurisdictions as pro-housing. Such pro-housing jurisdictions shall receive additional points or other preference in the scoring of competitive applications for funding under programs that support housing, transportation, infrastructure, land use, and related objectives. The administrators of each program will determine the value and form of the preference. So they're doing what they should be doing. But as we've talked about a lot today, there are two interrelated major difficulties in using the pro housing designation for scoring in the ATP. And then actually all of you came up with a couple more that we hadn't even thought of. So, but the ones that we're already considering is that one is that many ATP applicants do not have direct control over land use in their jurisdiction. And the other is that the ATP is so competitive, giving points for this could be a difference between being funded or not. But then we also heard that there's the issue of multi-jurisdictional projects. And then Nafili brought up the areas that are not experiencing growth. Okay, but with that said, everyone is well aware that housing is an absolutely critical issue in California. Josh and HCD have been very reasonable in working with us on how to incorporate this program into the ATP. We have time for the next cycle to work with our technical advisory committee and all of you, the work group, to figure out an equitable way to do this. And that would mean we can work with the Rural Counties Task Force and any other ways that we can try to figure out a way to successfully incorporate this for next cycle more directly. But my suggestion to all of you would be to not ignore this pro housing designation program for 2 years until it comes up again in the next ATP cycle. If you have jurisdiction over housing, look into applying. And if you don't, you might want to start encouraging those that do. I'll just say that. And with that, thanks again, Josh. And we were going to talk a little bit about quick bills, but we don't have time for that. So we're going to wrap up now to our action items. I think there was a lot today. So Alika did her best to write them down. So she's going to try to go over them. But if we've missed anything, send us an email and then we can make sure to include that. Alika?
Thanks, Lori. Okay, so Lori mentioned if there was anything that I missed, please feel free to contact us and I'll be happy to include it onto this list. Okay, so first off, there was some discussion regarding the leveraging. So we had a suggestion to allow complete streets projects to use shop funds for the leveraging question, as it would be beneficial to the smaller and rural areas or communities that don't have access to many funds. Further discuss transformative projects and the challenges that they face with funding for simple projects such as walking and biking for like sidewalks and bike lanes. And so we will be working with Woody and Nafili to bring this up at our future workshops. We'll also be discussing different types of plans. I know we got some suggestions of, let's see, we got the local roadway safety plan, campus and community long range plans, and the Vision Zero plans. And I know there were a few others that were suggested, so we'll make sure to look into those. And then, let's see, there may be possible discussions of changes to the DAC definitions. And I know Housing and Transportation Affordability Index was also brought up. So these will be topics that we will also continue discussing in the future. Derek Bailey also mentioned consideration for downscope projects between statewide and small urban and rural components. So we will further that discussion as well. Continuing to talk about the pro-housing designation and incorporating it into the ATP. And the last thing that I have is what Carl had mentioned, which was streamlining the application if housing requirements are going to be included. That's all I have.
So one thing, Alika, that I remember is that the next workshop we're going to have a couple minutes on the TRC.
Oh, correct.
So, Beverly, can you think of anything that? Okay, so if anybody, we have just a couple minutes. If anybody remembers anything else right now that they want to absolutely make sure that we have on our list of either things that we said that we would do or items that we would bring up in future workshops, we can take a couple more comments now. I'll give it just a minute, Justin.
One attendee, Mike Williams, asked if those action items can be captured and sent out in an email.
What was it again, Justin?
If those list of action items could be sent out as an email to attendees?
I guess we could do that. It's an email to all the attendees. Can we do that, Alika? Or
Yeah, we can do that. I know we were also planning on posting detailed notes, so we can also include these in the notes and post them on our website. But yeah, we can send stuff out to the attendees.
Okay.
From Victoria Custodio, are you going to do an analysis of non-infrastructure standalone projects over each cycle?
Yes.
From Rachel Peros, small item, CTC will get back to us on electronic submissions and number of hard copies.
That's a good one, thank you.
From David Ruperto, I believe the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act increases the set aside to MPOs for what used to be the Transportation Alternative Program. Will future workshops discuss changing the split in the ATP between statewide, MPO, and small urban and rural, or is change in statute needed?
Change in statute is needed for that.
No other questions have been sent at this time.
Okay, so do we have a final slide here? Okay, so our next workshop is next Wednesday, November 17th from 1 to 4. The registration is now available on the ATP website. Just to give you a little bit of preview, even though I don't think my inspirational or interesting ATP stories are nearly as effective virtually, but I plan on talking about walking at the next workshop. And so I think the last slides are our contact information, right, Alika? Okay, here's our contact information. Me, Beverly, and Alika, please contact us directly, all three of us or any of us, if you have any other questions. And I really, really appreciate the great dialogue today. It was really good, and thank you so much for all of your great questions and comments. I think this was a really good workshop. And do you have one other? Okay. And then we also, this is our the Commission's website and the active transportation, how you get to the active transportation website. And remember, if you want to schedule a site visit, contact Alika, or schedule a branch workshop. So anything else anybody can think of? Beverly, Alika, Justin? Okay. Thank you, everyone, and thank you, Justin, for helping us today. And have a great day, everybody, and we'll see you next Wednesday.